Alex Gupta with UATV. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Otilia Dhand. She is a Senior Vice President at Teneo Holdings. Hello, Dr. Dhand. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, good evening, Alex. Thank you for having me.
I wanted to ask you, it looks like Ukraine will be able to secure the $1 billion loan tranche from the IMF, but it's been delayed by a few months. Why has it been delayed?
Well, this is not the first time that a tranche from the IMF loan has been delayed. In fact, the previous one that was released last year in summer and then later in autumn, that one was delayed by almost 2 years. Almost a year, and we have at the time anticipated that further delays in disbursement of the IMF loan are actually likely. This is for two particular reasons. First of all, the Ukrainian government does not have a secure majority in the parliament. Therefore, whatever reforms are underlying the IMF tranche releases need to be negotiated on case-by-case basis and often horse-traded in the parliament. And the second aspect is that the current government, as it is set up, also has problems on the basis of implementation, which the IMF is also expecting, and therefore it is expecting to see a bit more in terms of commitments of the government when it comes to meeting individual targets. So there is also the systemic resistance and the problems in the parliament when it comes to the goals that the IMF has set. And this is becoming ever more pronounced as we move into the more difficult reforms, the structural reforms, such as the pension reform or the land reform, which is significantly more difficult to pass and implement in practice than the macroeconomic indicators adjustment that we saw early on in the program.
Could you explain the land reform that the IMF is seeking?
Well, there is a number of aspects that are troublesome in Ukraine. The basic idea would be to allow for rural development. And for that, the IMF would first of all seek the clarity of land ownership rights and their transferability. There is a number of aspects that need to be tackled, from the titles, the land registry, the governance of the land ownership, and also the titles that vary between the government, the communal ownership, and the private ownership of land. But the basic idea would be to allow for good protection and clear clarity on land ownership rights, their transfers, and thereby allowing for the trading with land, allowing the land to be as a collateral for financial instruments, and thereby fueling the rural development.
I know there is also an issue with the judiciary, about strengthening the judiciary, setting up an anti-corruption court, and strengthening the prosecutor's office.
That's correct. Well, this is probably one of the main complaints of the IMF when it comes to Ukrainian program. We have already seen some progress last year, which led to the release of the previous tranche. But here, this is particularly the topic where the implementation is an issue. It is not just a question of passing the correct laws in the parliament, but it is the question of implementation on the ground, of actually empowering the institutions to carry out anti-corruption drives and to bring to justice the people who are misusing office or embezzling money from the state. This is one of the aspects that the IMF is particularly concerned about, and perhaps the eye is less on individual issues of privatization or land reform, and actually much more on empowering the judiciary, on empowering the anti-corruption prosecutors, and actually carrying out the processes that would be necessary to bring to justice the ones who are suspect of corruption.
Does anything have to do with I know the central bank head is likely going to be leaving. Does that have anything to do with it?
Well, I'm not in place to comment on any ongoings in the central bank. I think that it has much more to do with the fact that the central bank governor has been a sort of a buffer between the president and the public. She's very much liked by the international financial community, but she's not particularly popular with the public. So it is something that has been expected for quite some time, and there are no particular concerns over the future direction of the monetary policy of Ukraine. Actually, the general expectations are that she would be replaced with somebody with pretty much the same policy leanings.
I know there's been trouble, especially with outside businesses when they deal with, investing, opening up subsidiaries in Ukraine with the Fiscal Service. As far as, or go ahead.
Right. Well, there is a number of obstacles that international businesses are facing in Ukraine. Fiscal Service is one of the aspects that have also been tackled in the run-up to the previous tranche last year. Hopefully, the implementation phase improves, and there will be less of red tape to the international businesses. But this is one of the complex aspects of implementation of policy once it is passed through the parliament.
If I was a CEO of a multinational company and I wanted to open up a subsidiary, invest in Ukraine, what would you tell me? How would you advise me? What are the risks? What are some of the better things to look forward to?
Well, one of the aspects to highlight is that Ukraine does have a new, fairly new agreement with the EU, and there clearly is a potential for economic growth. Ukraine has had its share of economic trouble in recent years due to various reasons, but the reforms that have been implemented, especially in the energy sector, give us a reason for optimism that there is a space for growth and that the economic picture will be clearing out for Ukraine. The growth expected in Ukraine for 2017 is actually quite reasonable at the level of 2% as compared to a significant slump in the past 2 years. And I think this is quite encouraging as compared to the picture that we would have been painting, let's say, a year and a half ago.
I wanted to ask you about the court case taking place in England between Ukraine and Russia. Russia, brought suit against Ukraine over a $3 billion debt. Would you be able to explain that a little bit more?
Right. So this is the question of a bond that was issued at the end of the Yanukovych government. This was a loan that was expected to reach as high as $15 billion US. And the first tranche was the $3 billion US worth of a governmental bond, which is in fact a private financing instrument. This is why we are seeing a lawsuit in the UK, because it was actually registered under English law, which is quite unusual for what is effectively sovereign financial aid. But this is the instrument that was selected, and this is the core of the problem. That when Ukraine was restructuring, is that as a part of the IMF program a year and a half ago. The Ukrainian government argued that all financial instruments in the form of bonds should be included, and therefore also the bond that was owned by the Russian government. On the other hand, the Russian government is arguing that Ukraine has defaulted on the debt that is not of the same type as the bonds that have been restructured, those that have been owned by private investors. And this is what the whole lawsuit is about. On the top of that, the Ukrainian government is also arguing that the debt that was made by the Yanukovych government was not made in the interest of the country, a so-called odious debt. So this is a fairly complex legal matter, and Russia decided to bring it into the public court in the UK, even though they had a chance to bring it to the arbitration court. But this is the way they decided to go. So let's see what the result will be.
Can the UK court, can they apply international law? Because I know one of Ukraine's defenses is Russia invaded us. They annexed Crimea.
Yes, well, the argument can be made, and UK has a custom law. But the question is what arguments the court will decide to take into regard. I'm not in a position to judge what arguments are going to be taken in regard. But the expectations are that once the decision is reached by the court, it will actually work the other way around, that the implication of that decision will be much more resounding in the context of international law. I
know that Ukraine also, they brought Russia to The Hague They're filing suit against Russia in The Hague. Could that decision, whether it turns in Ukraine's favor or Russia's favor, have any impact on the case in the UK court?
As I'm not a lawyer, that would be difficult to judge. Surely, in the eye of public, that would be something that would have its weight. But on the legal argument, it's difficult to say. The UN court process actually focuses on the invasion and on the annexation of Crimea and on the conflict in eastern Ukraine, rather than a financial instrument, which the bond is, the one that was carried to the UK courts.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dhand, for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
I'm Alex Gupta with UATV. I was speaking with Dr. Otilia Dhand of Teneo Holdings.